Gegroet reiziger, het is je main bitch, SnapJelly. Okay, let's never do that again. Today we're gonna talk about the murder stroke, also known as the Mordhau or the Mordschlag. Mordhau and Mordschlag roughly translates to murder stroke. Hence the translation. Now, a lot of you guys are already gonna know what the murder stroke is. But a lot of you guys are not gonna know what the murder stroke is. And if you don't know what the murder stroke is, this is the video for you, because I'm gonna explain what the murder stroke is. If you do know what the murder stroke is, then please still watch this video, because I need to watch time. See my channel down there, it's tiny. Right? I'm like that one Asian guy in a huge homosexual orgy. It's just small and pathetic. I'm kidding. I'm joking, right? I love all people that participate in my homosexual orgy, even the small ones. Okay, so what is the murder stroke? Well, in its most basic form, it is very simple. It's when you grab a sword by the blade with both hands and use the guard as a hammer. Now, Jelly, won't you cut yourself if you do that? No. Alright, behold, a kitchen knife with the same color as my shirt. Look at this. Not cutting myself. Still not cutting myself, by the way. Still not cutting myself. For some reason, people have no issue imagining them grabbing a knife like this by the blade and not cutting themselves. But when you make this blade longer, aka sword size, people believe that when you grab it by the blade, it would just magically all of a sudden slice through your fingers. It won't, okay? Imagine when you're cutting meat. And for the vegetarians out there, imagine when you're cutting meat. When you're cutting meat, you slice the meat, right? You don't press down. Why? Because pressing down doesn't work. It doesn't cut anything. Our flesh is structured in such a way that just pressure will not cause a cut. Things like cucumbers, for example, don't have the same texture, and this allows people to do those tricks where you put a cucumber on somebody's body and they go swoosh, slice through the cucumber with a sword that is probably not even sharp at all, because that would cut the cucumber, but it will not cut your skin. Now, the thing is though, if it does create a cut in your hand when you're... it doesn't work well with a fader because the blade is too thin, so I'm just gonna use this. If you do a murder stroke, bam, and you do cut your hand, then it will be a fair trade-off, I would say, because you would have a small tiny cut in your hand compared to your opponent having a broken skull. I think that's a fair trade-off. But even if you're afraid of that, then you can still wear just a very simple, light, thin leather glove, and that would already make things 100 times safer, and also more comfortable, because that is a downside of the murder stroke. It's not very comfortable for your hands. Yes, I mean that. It is, even if it's not dangerous for your hands, it is still uncomfortable to grab a sharp blade like that. Now, why would you ever possibly want to do the murder stroke? Now, basically, the murder stroke is a technique for people to use when they are armed with a sword and facing an opponent in armor. Because as probably most of you guys would already know, a sword is not going to do much against an armored opponent. So if you do find yourself in a situation where your opponent is armored and you have nothing but a sword, then the best thing you could do, the heaviest part of the sword you can attack with, is the grip, the guard, the pommel, and so forth. And if you use it like this, like a big lever, then you get the most out of it, arguably. Now, that being said, I'd like to make a point and say that swords are not very heavy, as, again, most of you would probably know. A long sword on average is 1.6 kilos, is what people say. And yes, I don't know what that is in pounds, I'll put it in the screen for you to read. And there are, I would say, heavy examples. There are always exceptions to this rule. There are long swords that are like 2 kilos or 2.5 kilos. But on average, people say it should be 1.6. But even if it's not, even if you have a long sword that's 2.5 kilos heavy, that's still not very heavy, right? So if somebody in full plate armor would walk up against you and you would whack him with somebody that's only 2.5 kilos, does that really have an effect? Well, yeah, actually. People that have tried it, the murder stroke, they say that it knocks the absolute shit out of you. They say that you get the wind knocked out of you if you get hit by a murder stroke, a proper one, like a full power one. And it is pretty dangerous, and that's why usually in HEMA it's not allowed, for good reason, because honestly it will bash straight through your fencing mask and into your face. You don't want that. I've never tried it, gotta be honest. I've never had somebody murder stroke me, which is something that I not necessarily want to try, because I like not having brain damage, but on the other hand, there's not a lot going on up here anyway, so I might as well. try. I will try. I would. I should. I will. At some point. Not today though. Now you should not see the murder stroke as somebody with a sword holding it like this and just bashing the shit out of an opponent in armor, because that would probably not work very well. Your guard would bend eventually, and yeah, your opponent, he's gonna get knocked over, but you may very well not actually damage the person underneath, aside from disorienting him. So basically what you'd want to do with a murder stroke is you get an initial hit in on the helmet, probably. If you smack him, as soon as that hit lands, you'd want to turn the sword around like this and go for a half-swording thrust in the eye slits, in the neck, or if he falls down, go down and stab him underneath the pauldrons, the shoulder blades, something like that. You don't want to stand here like this and start whang, 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 hammering the shit out of your opponent, because, well, it would just fuck up your sword, and you wouldn't really accomplish much, to be honest, because after a while, you would just get up, and you'd want to finish it off, and to finish off somebody in plate armor, you're still gonna have to go next to the plate armor, in between the gaps somewhere, even if you have a heavy weapon, like a mace or a warhammer, which is basically made to whack the shit out of plate armor. Still, the chance of you actually hurting the person underneath is not as great as people think. Something like a mace would be more or less used to beat up somebody's armor so bad that the joints are fucked up and you wouldn't be able to move anymore. And personally, with the grip of a sword, could you do that? Maybe, maybe not. It would fuck up the armor, it would also fuck up your sword. I would say it's just a huge waste in today's like HEMA reenactment groups. I think it's just a waste of armor and swords. So I don't think you should do it. But you could maybe try it out. It will be more efficient though to just turn the sword around and go for a stab finish. Now, another point is that... What the fuck am I standing on? What is this? Oh, it's a sheath for the rapier that I don't use. Okay. Don't need it. Now, another point that I want to make is that YouTubers, such as myself, continuously complain about fantasy swords in which there are spikes and protrusions on the grip or around the handle, around the part that you want to hold with a sword. Why? Because, well, it's inconvenient. You don't want to poke yourself with this. But there are some descriptions of swords that are particularly designed, arguably, for the use of the murder stroke. In the Talhofer, there's a sword that has a pommel, which is basically sort of a hammer and pointy bits here. Was that the Talhofer? I think it was the Talhofer. I don't know. Anyway, there are some drawings of it, and the argument was made that I have heard is that the Talhofer specifically deals with judicial bouts, whatever. And those people, they knew beforehand, weeks beforehand, who they were gonna face and in what equipment they were gonna face their opponent. So if you knew your opponent was gonna have armor, a set of armor, and you could only use a sword, then you might want to make a sword that is specifically made to be able to be good at murder strokes. Like swords that have spikes here and are pointy here and aren't sharp all the way, perhaps only at the end, or perhaps only pointy, because really you're not going to do a lot of slicing against an opponent in plate armor. It's just not going to work. So a sword that's not sharp on the edge in that case specifically would actually be more convenient, because then you could just hold it like this safely. That's the thing I want to say though. Even if you don't cut yourself with a murder stroke or by grabbing the blade, not easily at least, it's still smart to not hold the blade like this, but like this, with your thumb on one side. Because, you know, you put an awful lot of pressure on that small part of your thumb there. And yeah, you really wouldn't want that, because that could get cut easily, and that's just annoying. So you'd want to hold it like this. But if your sword isn't sharp, you could hold it like that, and that's just a lot sturdier. Perhaps it's an option. But on the other hand, when you're talking about battlefield situations and people just carrying their swords with them, you still don't want spikes around the hilt, because that's just inconvenient if that's dangling around you. Or in any other scenario where you wouldn't do the murder stroke, there's, you know, those points would just get in the way. It's inconvenient to have a pommel that's not nice to grab. Not everybody is a pommel grabber, I must reiterate that. Some people just hold their swords like this, more or less, and they're not bothered by spiky pommels, I suppose. But still, right? Just a point that I want to make. Another point that I want to make is just something that I thought about, and that is, I wonder if the murder stroke, the idea of smacking your opponent with the handle of your sword, was common knowledge or not. Because the sword fighting that we practice today in HEMA is not normal sword fighting in the sense that it was the sword fighting that the average people did back in the day. What we study today in HEMA is advanced sword fighting for the elites, so to speak. And frankly, we don't know how the common person fought. That's the information that's just lost in time. And even if we did know, I think hardly anybody would practice it. Because if it's common knowledge now, if the elite version of sword fighting is common knowledge, then why would you want to learn, the basic pleb version? What I wonder if, because you could see this both ways. You could see it as an advanced technique of somebody going like, oh, but you face somebody in armor and you only have a sword. Here's something you can do. You can smack him in the visor, you can hook, you can do all kinds of things. Or you could say it's pretty logical, because people back then who handled swords a lot, they would know that you could hold the sword this way. And they would also know that a sword cut against somebody in plate armor isn't gonna do shit. So it could also very well just be common knowledge to just hold your sword like this and whack with it. And arguably the slightly more advanced techniques that you could do from here might be more elite, you could say. But yeah, well, frankly, I don't know, but it's something fun to think about. Lastly, I want to say that the murder stroke probably didn't happen an awful lot in history. Even if people knew about it and it did work, I don't think it happened a lot, because the scenario of you encountering somebody in plate armor and you have nothing but a sword, it's not super likely. I mean, it's not unlikely, but it's not super likely either. So basically, you're there, you're a man-at-arms. If you're not a man-at-arms, or not like a fully armored soldier, it's unlikely already that you're gonna be sent off to fight fully armored soldiers, right? So it's not like you just had a bunch of foot soldiers, like lightly equipped with swords, and there's a group of men-at-arms in front of you, and your general would go attack them, and everybody would grab their sword and murder stroke and start charging, because that's just ridiculous. Everybody would get slaughtered. So you would probably already be a man-at-arms yourself. You would have your armor and your poleaxe, for example, or whatever. And you would encounter another man-at-arms, and he'd have a poleaxe as well, and you smack him and your poleaxe breaks, and he smacks you and his breaks as well, which could happen, and then you both draw your sidearm, which is your sword, and I guess you could do that. But otherwise, you would be at a very close distance. There's a very large chance that you would just start wrestling at that point, at which point you would draw your dagger. So really, the murder stroke it's something like, if you are unarmored and your opponent is armored and you have a sword, then it's your best bet. You'd want to keep your distance, I'd say, at that point. If you are armored as well, and you have a sword but not a dagger, I don't think that the murder stroke is the best option. You could go for murder stroke first, and after that fails, if it fails, you would still wrestle and grab your dagger. Otherwise, yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's a fairly popular thing. A lot of people know about it, but I honestly, personally wonder how often it was actually used and how effective it actually was, and how common knowledge it was. All of those things are questions that are just fascinating to think about, and I would like to hear your opinion. Oh, I do want to say, by the way, that I think that if you manage to jam the guard in the side of somebody's visor or something, or in the eye slit, like a weak spot of the helmet, then you could possibly get through and crack his skull. I still wouldn't count on it though. Alright, so I think that's everything I want to say. So, if you stuck around this long, you might as well subscribe. Also follow me on social media, links are in the description below. And thank you for joining my quest, and I hope you'll join me in the next one. Bye guys.